You've probably noticed it too. Something small moving underneath things. The ones who've started to see through the false idea aren't shouting about it. They aren't trying to convince anyone. They're simply leaving quietly, calmly, without telling why or making drama. They are pulling away from conversations that go in circles, out of jobs that drain their energy, out of relationships built on roles instead of what's real. And it isn't anger that drives them, it's clear sight. When you finally see that so much of what looks like closeness is actually acting, the only reasonable thing to do is retreat, not as rebellion, but as self-care. When truth becomes your oxygen, you simply stop breathing the dirty air of fakery. Waking up isn't an idea. It's an event, a breaking of the spell. It's the moment the curtain lifts and you realize the play never ended because it was never real to begin with. You watch people argue about false ideas, fight over shadows, invest their energy into stories that collapse under the faintest light of awareness. And you can't hate them for it. You were one of them once. But now, when you try to join in, to laugh at the same jokes, or share in the same strong feeling, something inside you won't move. It's as if your soul refuses to play along. You sit in meetings and feel the senselessness of every sentence. You look at screens and see only unreality. You stand among friends and feel totally alone, not because you've lost touch with them, but because you've found touch with yourself. This isn't pride, it's structure. When awareness grows, it gets too big for its old container. What once felt comfortable begins to choke. You can no longer force yourself to shrink to fit the expectations of others. Every false smile feels like a dishonesty. Every small talk feels like a slow dying. And so you begin to step back from noise, from approval, from the constant act of being normal. The world calls it unfriendly. You call it oxygen. What you're really doing is protecting the inner light that is finally sparked within you. You're learning that awakening isn't about preaching light, it's about protecting it. At first, this retreat feels like disappearance. People might say, "You've changed," and they'll be right. You've stopped following the group dream. You've stopped mixing up, fitting in with real closeness. In the silence that follows, you start to hear something you hadn't in years. Your own voice. Real, true, honest. And for the first time, it feels honest. That voice doesn't want praise. It wants truth. It doesn't crave recognition. It craves reality. And so, the vanishing continues, not out of rejection of the world, but as a return to something far more real than it. When the retreat deepens, something remarkable begins to happen. The noise of the world fades, and what's left is a strange kind of peace. The kind that at first feels empty, but slowly reveals itself as vast. You find yourself sitting alone, perhaps for the first time without the need to make noise to fill the silence. The phone stays dark. The social noise no longer tugs at your attention. There is just you, and what you've spent years avoiding. Your own presence. And though it feels strange at first, this quiet time begins to feed you. You start to realize that the loneliness you once feared wasn't caused by being alone. It was caused by being surrounded by people who couldn't truly see you. Now, in the stillness, you finally begin to meet the person you've been running from, yourself. This stage, the hermit phase, is not appealing. It's not the joyful quiet time people imagine when they speak of going within. It's raw, confusing, sometimes painfully silent. All the old identities begin to fall apart. The doer, the helper, the actor. The masks you once wore so easily now feel like lead. Without them, you're fully exposed in the truest sense. You face your fears without things that pull your focus. You feel emotions without translation. You start to notice how much of your life was built on avoiding this exact encounter. But the more you stay, the more something small, yet deep, begins to shift. The silence becomes a teacher. The quiet time, a mirror. You begin to sense that you were never actually unconnected. You were just tuned to the wrong frequency. As days turn into weeks, Your nervous system begins to reset. The never-ending stream of information gives way to an inner rhythm that feels very old. You no longer wake up craving excitement. You wake up curious. What happens if you follow your own natural pace? What happens if you trust the pull of stillness instead of fighting it? You start to notice how the smallest things, the sound of rain, the rhythm of your own breathing, begin to feel like conversations with something huge and wise. You realize that awareness doesn't need noise to grow. It needs space. The more you let go of distractions, the more clearly you begin to see what is real. This is when the hermit becomes the magic changer, transforming isolation into deep understanding. And in that alchemy, something extraordinary starts to grow. You no longer crave the old life. You no longer ache for the approval of the sleeping world. You begin to feel a quiet strength rising. Not the strength to control or to show off, but the strength to remain true. You understand now that being alone was never banishment. It was beginning ceremony. Every hour spent in silence was the soul building itself again, preparing you for the next phase, to return, not as who you were, but as who you have become, clear, steady, awake. Eventually, the silence that once felt like retreat begins to hum with a new kind of readiness. Something within you, long inactive, begins to stir again, not with rush, but with purpose. You've spent enough time dissolving in the cocoon. Now, the wings begin to take shape. But here's the truth few understand. The return isn't a sudden comeback into society. It's small. You reappear like dawn, gradually, quietly, without fuss. You're still here, but different. The world looks the same, yet it doesn't pull at you the way it once did. The noise continues, but you don't feel the need to respond. The game goes on, but you no longer mix it up with life. This is what it means to become a border dweller, someone who lives between worlds, awake among the dreaming, steady among the busy. You move differently now. When people speak, you hear more than their words. You sense their pain, their confusion, their hidden longing for truth. But you no longer try to fix it. You've learned that waking cannot be forced. It happens only when the dreamer is ready. So instead of preaching, you live, quietly, truly. Your presence becomes your teaching. You show balance in a world addicted to being broken into pieces. And without trying, you begin to draw others who are ready. Not through convincing others, but through matching feeling. They find you because your frequency matches what their soul has begun to seek. In this way, awakening spreads not by argument, but by example. This is when your quiet time changes into helping others. You might start writing, creating, or simply living in a way that shows depth back to those around you. You speak less, but your silence carries weight. You participate, but you do not get lost. You give, but without exhaustion. Every action now arises from clarity rather than strong urge. And people notice. They may not understand it, but they feel it. That small difference between acting and being present. You've stopped trying to impress and started to express. You've stopped seeking approval and started living in balance. The shift is invisible to most, yet obvious to those who can sense truth. And though you walk among others again, you never fully return to the old world. You can't. Once you've seen the machinery behind the false idea, you can never unsee it. But you also no longer carry resentment for it. The awakened person becomes like a translator, able to speak the language of the sleeping world while remaining fluent in silence. You offer a bridge, not a battle. And that is the quiet revolution. You don't destroy the dream. You shine a light on it. You don't demand awakening. You show it. You've discovered that the most radical act is not rebellion, but awareness. And that awareness, kept steady and lived, changes everything it touches. As the days move on, you notice something deep. You are no longer trying to hold on to awareness. Awareness is holding you. What once required effort now feels like your natural state. You begin to see that awakening isn't about rejecting the world. It's about seeing it through a cleaner lens. The same city, the same faces, the same sky. All of it looks different now. It's as if a gentle glow has returned to ordinary things. The cup of tea, the rhythm of footsteps, the wind passing through leaves, each carries a quiet intelligence, a pulse of aliveness that you had missed when you were asleep. You realize that awakening was never about escaping life, but finally seeing it. And yet, even in this clarity, there are tests. The old patterns do not disappear. They linger, waiting for moments of weakness. Sometimes, when exhaustion sets in or loneliness whispers, the dream tries to pull you back, old fears resurface. You catch yourself slipping into old roles, craving recognition or seeking distraction. But the difference now is awareness. You can see the pull without becoming it. You breathe. You pause. You watch the false idea try to lure you back, and you smile, not with pride, but with understanding. You've danced this dance before. Now you know the steps. The power isn't in never falling asleep again. It's in recognizing the sleep for what it is and choosing to wake each time. Gradually, you begin to live with a kind of easy self-control. Not the self-control of control, but of harmony. You honor your energy, your gut feeling, your limits. You no longer explain them, because explanation is not needed for those who get it and pointless for those who don't. You speak less, but your words have sharpness. You listen more, but without taking in others' chaos. You are stable, and from this stability, something unexpected grows, concern for others. Not the soft, sentimental kind, but the fierce concern of understanding. You look at people trapped in the game and see not enemies, but versions of yourself from another time. You realize that everyone is awakening in their own way, even if they don't yet know it. This is where the awakened stop being wanderers and start becoming anchors for a conversation that feels real, a friendship that no longer depends on pretending, a space where silence isn't awkward but sacred. This is how the new world begins, not with statements or groups, but with a handful of people who have stopped acting. They gather in small circles, often without even naming what they are doing. They share food, talk about what's true, create art that feels alive. These gatherings may seem small, unnoticed to the larger world, but they are not. Each one is a node of balance, a spark of awareness quietly stabilizing the group feeling. This is how the awakened build the new earth, not by fighting the old, but by outgrowing it. You start noticing these circles everywhere, in remote cabins, small apartments, online spaces hidden away from algorithms. They are forming naturally, like star groups coming together. There are no leaders, no power structure, no rules, just matching feeling, a shared understanding that truth matters more than acting. The people in these spaces speak slowly, listen deeply, and allow pauses. They aren't trying to fix each other. They are learning how to be together consciously. There is laughter, there are tears, and there is an unspoken relief, the relief of not having to pretend. These are not communities in the old sense. They are safe spaces for truth, growing quietly hidden from notice. And as these circles expand, the larger world begins to shift in small ways. Art becomes less about show and more about sharing truth. Work begins to change shape. People leave jobs that demand their spirit in exchange for survival and create ways of living that honor being real over speed. Even the way people speak starts to change. Fewer slogans, more sincerity. The old systems, political, corporate, social, begin to look strangely old-fashioned, like props from a movie whose credits are rolling. You realize that the revolution was never going to come through conflict. It was always going to come through awareness. The most radical act in a world built on sleep is to stay awake, gently, steadily awake. And still, you remain at the edge, not fully in the new, not bound to the old. You live as a bridge. You can walk into the city and not be taken over by it. You can talk with those still dreaming without judging them. You can take part in the world's movements while never forgetting they are movements within a much larger stillness. This is skill, not escaping the false idea, but moving through it clearly. You realize that awakening was never about going higher than life. It was about going deeply into it, fully conscious, fully human, fully here. By the time you reach this stage, the idea of awakening itself feels almost unimportant. You no longer think of yourself as awakened or asleep, advanced or behind. Those were concepts the mind needed once, markers for a journey that has now disappeared into being. You've stopped seeking markers. You've stopped measuring your progress. You simply live, and that living becomes your offering, your presence, your way of listening, your way of moving through the world. All of it sends something silent. People may not understand what has changed in you, but they feel it. They soften in your presence. They breathe deeper. They remember something very old and real within themselves. And you realize this is the true purpose of disappearing, to return carrying light, invisible but obvious. You become what the mystics called a living signal, a quiet sender of balance. You don't need to teach. You show it. You don't need to convince. You reflect. In your eyes, people glimpse what they've forgotten. In your stillness, they taste what they've been searching for. Even the chaotic spaces you enter begin to gently reorganize. Meetings feel calmer. Conversations become more real. Homes filled with noise begin to quiet. You didn't plan this. It's the natural outward flow of a whole spirit. The strange truth of the awakened is that the more they disappear, the more their presence becomes clear. You are no longer in the world, but the world moves differently because of you. And there comes a moment, quiet, simple, when you realize you no longer need to protect your light. It no longer flickers in the wind. It has become the wind. You can walk into any room, any system, any storm, and remain unchanged. Not because you've hardened, but because you've merged. You've stopped making a separation between pure and ordinary, between spiritual and human, between awakening and life. It is all one movement, one breathing whole. You've seen that the darkness was never your enemy. It was the place where your light was born. You've seen that the false idea was never the problem. It was the training ground for seeing. And with that realization, peace arrives. Not the weak peace of not caring, but the strong peace of accepting everything. You embrace it all now, every dreamer, every wound, every shade of being, as part of the same unfolding awareness. And so, you no longer vanish from the world, you vanish into it, completely, quietly, seamlessly, not to escape, but to serve. Your life becomes a message that needs no words, a vibration that ripples outward, touching those who are ready to remember. You don't know where it leads, and that's the beauty. Awakening is no longer a path, but a pulse. You are that pulse now. Steady, present, free. If these words felt true, if you've ever felt that strange pull to retreat, to disappear, to become still, trust it. You are not leaving the world. You are learning how to see it again. Let yourself rest. Let yourself disappear. Let yourself be remade in silence. And when you return, return as the light the sleeping world forgot it needed. Share this with someone who feels the same quiet calling and remind them, disappearing isn't the end. It's the beginning of everything real. But the silence doesn't just show you peace, it shows you yourself. When the world's noise fades, what rises first isn't clarity, but the stored history of everything you've avoided. The memories you buried under success, the feelings you numbed with things to do, the regrets you thought time would erase, they all begin to appear. At first, it feels like going backward. You question if you're falling back. But in truth, this is the first real forward step. For the first time, nothing is in the way. Awareness, when clean, shines a light on everything, even the parts we wish it wouldn't. You begin to notice small shakes of old ways of being, the urge to prove, to fix, to control, to be liked. They visit like ghosts, not to scare you, but to ask to be seen. You realize that awakening isn't about destroying the sense of self, but about meeting it without fear. It's about looking directly into the face of how you were trained and saying, I see you, and I no longer need you to keep me safe. In that moment, something lets go. The false stories lose power. There are nights when you cry without a reason, days when you feel both empty and full. You start to understand that this stage is not punishment, but cleaning. The tears, the tiredness, the being alone, they are the body's way of rearranging itself around truth. Every emotion you allow, without judging, becomes a doorway. Every moment of discomfort, an invitation to return to your center. The more you stay with what appears, the more you sense a quiet strength building underneath. A knowing begins to form that nothing you meet inside you can destroy you. That even the darkest thought is simply a wave returning to its ocean. When this realization comes, the fear of yourself, perhaps the deepest fear of all, begins to melt away. And with that, the silence changes tone. It's no longer heavy. It becomes alive, almost like a friend. You begin to feel that the same presence watching your pain is the one healing it. The same awareness that sees the shadow is made of light. Now, in the stillness, you finally begin to meet the person you've been running from, yourself.